Good afternoon, everyone. It's so lovely to have you here. The chat is popping off already. Honestly, it makes such a difference. There was a comment there from Simon who said, "I've missed you guys," which is lovely. And so it's so nice to have you back. And hello, everyone. I'm somewhere else today. I'm at the Content Square offices as I'm here hosting the marketing meetup in real life in London this evening. So I really hope to see some of you here tonight in London as well, if you can make it. But for the meantime, welcome to today. And thank you also, everyone who's already made the chat feature so bloomingly incredible. I was saying to Kerry, in particular, just before we got going on today's session, they're like, just watch out for that chat feature because it's pretty special. It's pretty special every blooming time. And so if you want to pop in there where you're watching from, then please do, because it's always lovely to know where everyone is. And also while you're there, you'll see in the chat feature that you got a little option that presently might say to hosts and panelists. Make sure that you switch your chat feature to everyone, and so everyone can see all of your messages. It happens every week where there's some incredible messages that come through that come only through to the hosts, and i.e. me and the people that come along as in the speaker. And so please do. I can see we've got Bolton, Derby, Sheffield, Somerset, Cairo, Manchester, Southampton, Putney, Preston, Cardiff, Toronto, Durham, Guildford. It's crazy. So lovely to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. As ever, there are two challenges that I will throw your way before today's session. The first is, please do keep that chat feature going throughout the duration of today's session, interacting with one another and the content that comes out. It's so lovely. And I think one of the benefits of these virtual sessions is that you don't have to sit there and watch someone speak and sort of have a thought in your head. You can verbalize it to the other people watching in and sort of share a perspective. I think that's really lovely and a real strength of what we're doing here with virtual sessions. So please do share your thoughts, your expressions and your feelings as we go throughout the duration of the session. The other thing is that after today's session, do please drop on social media your biggest takeaway from today's session. It makes the world of difference in terms of us getting the word out there about the marketing meetup, but also helps us have a conversation afterwards where people, and you see it every week, where they put in the comment section, "Oh, I agree, I disagree." I think it's really cool. So do share on social after today's session. With those two challenges lodged in our mind, let's get going with the introduction proper. So today we have Molly Baker, who's the founder of Indie Consulting, and Kerry Thorpe, who's the head of Comms EU for Ben & Jerry's, which is a pretty cool job title as it goes. Molly and Kerry are two new friends to me, but when Kerry got in touch a little while ago and said, let's speak at the marketing meetup, then I was like, yeah, that seems like a pretty good idea. And we put together a session that I think is a really great blend of just perfection for the marketing meetup. And I know that's true because already on season 8 that this is the webinar which had the most sign-ups straight away when we announced season 8, which was really cool. Today's topic is really interesting because we often speak about campaigns as marketers, but rarely have I heard it sort of inspected. More than that, as our roles shift, and this idea that there's digital and then there's in person as two separate things sort of blend away and it just becomes marketing once again, then we need to know how to produce campaigns that match these modern expectations. And that's why this session feels really cool. If you have any questions as they come up throughout the duration of today's session, then please do use the Q&A feature. The way you find that is you'll wiggle your mouse or whatever device you're on, and you'll find a feature called Q&A. You can drop your questions in there. And if you see any questions that you like, give them a thumbs up. That will mean that we prioritize those questions at the end. Before we get going on today's session, my last thing to say is a big thank you to our sponsors. And this week's featured sponsor is Impression. Impression are a marketing agency based in Nottingham and also have offices in London. They do pretty much the full stack of agency things, whether it's PPC, SEO, affiliate, social, and all sorts of things for a really amazing array of clients. I went to school with the founder and I know him as like a diamond of a human being when he was a young person, and he's carried that through to the agency that he's built today. It was a really, really cool story to see in action. So do take the time to check out Impression. One thing I'll also be doing from Impression is sending through an agency selection guide where they're looking for participants. So if you work for an agency, do take the time in the next couple of days when I send it the newsletter to see that agency selection guide form and contribute to that. They'd really love your submissions. Also, a big thank you to Attest, Hrefs, Redgate, Impression, Cambridge Marketing College, Content Square, where I am today, and Brand Recruitment. One ask is that please do say thank you to those folks after today's session. With all that said, that's my introduction done. So Molly, I think you're speaking first, so it's over to you.
Awesome. Okay, let me share my screen. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having us today. We're super, super excited to be here and are planning to go through just the details, the tactical steps that we take when Kerry and I both think about how to make amazing campaigns that drive impact both online and in the digital world. So really looking forward to chatting through this with you guys today.
Just some introductions. Joe's actually done a better introduction myself than I could, but I am Head of Communications for Europe at Ben & Jerry's. And that means I work across both our product campaigns when we're talking about ice cream flavors, whether that's Peace Pop or Son of a Witch. And then also I work across our activism campaigns. So really bringing people into movements and driving change in the world.
Wonderful. And I'm Molly. It's great to meet everyone. I am the founder and CEO of Indie Consulting, which I started about 4 years ago now. I had spent some time on the brand side and agency side before that. And we work primarily across CPG, health services, and a little bit of travel as well. So really excited to be here.
And then we thought we'd say how we know each other. So Molly used to lead our digital work at Ben & Jerry's. So we worked together for a number of years at Ben & Jerry's before Molly founded Indie Consulting. Then we became firm running friends. So we'd basically try and do a trip and a marathon or something together, just as it's used to hang out outside of work. Then it became lots of coffees and Zoom meetings. And now we actually enjoy working together, that we find projects like this. And we asked Joe if we could do this together. So we're either really great friends or kind of weird little crushes on each other professionally, but it works really well. And I love the way Molly's brain works and kind of complements the experiential and media and social background that I come from.
Wonderful. Okay, so getting into it, when we were thinking through the fundamentals of impactful campaigns, we really find that focusing in on these 3 areas is something that we always try to keep in mind. So, brilliant campaigns come from brilliant planning. Kerry and I joke a lot that, the devil's in the details and there's no such thing as over planning to a certain extent. So keeping that in mind and being detailed and intentional about plans is only going to make the impact greater. We also try to keep our consumer in mind first, always. So whether that's thinking through the platforms that we select, the assets that we're creating, the medias that buys that we're placing, how are we putting ourselves in the consumer's shoes and creating the best experience possible for them? And then, of course, as we kind of have spoken to already in this session today, we live in a world where we have so many different touch points, both online and offline, that we're constantly trying to connect, which makes the job that we do complicated at times and challenging. But how we connect the dots and make sure that our executional practices are as streamlined as possible will hopefully drive impact and a great user experience for our end consumer. So when we think about the how of this, we break down our campaign planning into 6 key components. So we'll be diving into each one of these in more detail, and Kerry and I will be going back and forth on the specifics here. But ultimately, these 6 steps are a part of every campaign that we plan. This is how we did our campaign planning at Ben & Jerry's, and has inspired a lot of the work and sort of campaign planning that my team does today on a lot of different types of brands as well. So it's been fine-tuned and adjusted over time, certainly. But I think that with each of these 6 steps, we're able to get to an outcome that is cross-channel and detailed and often impactful, hopefully always impactful. So ultimately, starting with what are we trying to accomplish and who are we trying to talk to is always the first step that we take. This helps to inspire the comms idea that we align on, the opportunities, the challenges that might be coming along with that. We do a really detailed selection on platform strategy and channel selection. I think that when we think about the digital landscape, the e-commerce landscape, the offline landscape, there's just so many different places where we can touch consumers and communicate with consumers today. So being very intentional about where we choose to show up is something that we put a lot of thought into. And then these things inform our comms calendar and the assets and investment that we put behind those communications. Finally, we, of course, always want to be looking at having an optimization plan in place as well, and measurement so that we can ensure that we're accomplishing the goals that we're setting out to accomplish. So when we think about creating those jobs to be done and really getting into the details on goal setting, we try to take an audience first approach. So, really looking at our consumer and figuring out what value are we ultimately trying to provide for them. So there are a lot of different need states that we consider when we're building our jobs to be done section of this campaign plan. This is an example of fundamental need states that might be leveraged for, a values-based campaign or something in the nonprofit space, for example, where we're really looking at these human-centered needs that we are hopefully playing a role in fulfilling for our end consumer. So there are different ones for if we're thinking about food and beverage or hair or personal care, we can look at different types of need states, but these keep us rooted in always trying to make sure that we're providing value back to our end audience. And then this brings us to the details of putting a plan on a page that will ultimately act as the foundation for all of the campaign and activation plans to follow as it relates to the specific goal that we have in mind. So there's a lot of detail here. I hope this doesn't come off as overwhelming, but we wanted to show a fully fleshed out example of what this looks like so that you guys can really just see what goes into this. I think ultimately this exercise is probably the most important thing that Kerry and I do when we're planning a campaign, because this is our sort of source of truth, right? At any point throughout our planning process, if we have questions or not feeling sure about something, we come back to this and make sure, are the tactics that we're putting in place, the assets that we're creating, the platforms that we're selecting, are they going to be aligned back to the details that we have here? Do they align with our business goals? Do they align with the need states that we're looking to fulfill? Do they fit into the occasions that we have selected? So this example here is for a nonprofit that we have been doing some work with this year. We do one pro bono project a year, and this is an example of the beginning of the campaign plan that we are working on for them. So ultimately, looking at finding ways to increase their female mentorship program. That was our ultimate business goal. And with that, we have business KPIs, we have marketing objectives, we have audiences and key comms that act as the foundation for all of the plans to follow. So while simple, also detailed, and hopefully a helpful tool just to leverage as a foundation for the basis of any campaign plan. So now over to Kerry for some of the more exciting pieces.
So now we're getting to that second box from that slide of boxes that Molly showed you in the beginning. And this is around the comms big idea and priorities and how you're going to communicate your campaign and talk about messages. But to allude to what Molly said earlier, we first need to know who we are as a business. So communications can only take us so far. We need to understand what our business strategy is, who we are as a company, who we are as a business, before we move into that how to message the campaign space. So at Ben & Jerry's, we like to think of ourselves as a company and not a brand. And we want to connect with people on a values-based level, a soul-based level. So really connect with people over something more than just ice cream. Whilst ice cream is a great personal connection, but really connect with people on the deeper values that we have as a company, as set out by our co-founders, Ben and Jerry. And as a happy result of that, this will build long-term loyalties with our ice cream fans or consumers. But it's really about doing what feels right from our values and starting with our values. So you know who you are as a business, and now it comes on to how do you communicate the campaign that you're planning. So I'm going to bring in an example of a campaign that Ben and Jerry's recently ran. We ran it with Tony's Chocolate Only. I'm not sure if you've kind of tried their their chocolate before, but it's brilliant. Tony's are a chocolate company that happens to also be an activist. They've done loads to transform the chocolate industry and make it more equitable. And really their main mission is making chocolate that's modern slavery free. So when Ben and Jerry's first started thinking, should we do a partnership with Tony Chocolate Only, it started from that values place. And we like to think that the two companies kind of flirted with each other for a while and had different meetings that were like dates to work out if they should connect, how it would work from this impact space. The big idea was, how can Ben and Jerry's make changes in their supply chain or our supply chain in order to really change the chocolate industry for a more equitable place. So we signed up to Tony's Chocolate Only's open chain, which is really detailed, but in a nutshell, it means sourcing traceable cocoa, which then in turn means a fairer world for cocoa farmers. And we called this big idea the chocolate love affair, being fairness being such a big part of it, and kind of our affair with one another being the fact that we really admired each other's companies for the humor and tone of voice, but also for the values at the heart of each company. So I'm going to talk you through how this kind of articulates itself in what we call the comms tree. But first of all, I'll talk you through the messaging process. So here are some steps that we take in a messaging process. It may seem simple, but actually when it comes to messaging, it's really difficult. And if you aren't having tense conversations with colleagues and kind of thrashing out one version and then going back to another, then you're probably doing something wrong. So it's okay that this feels frustrating and difficult. We start with the big idea, what we're doing, why we're doing it, who we're doing it with, and what the hook is for the people that we're reaching out to. Then the comms tree, which really talks about prioritizing our messages, what we want to say, who we want to say it to, and making sure that what we want to share, people will care about, because the two don't always mean the same thing. And then working out what we will and won't say. We don't want to inadvertently with our campaigns exclude people, accidentally make offense to people with intersectional identities, lots of different work to do in that space. Then working out challenges and opportunities. We have a saying at Ben & Jerry's, if it's not fun, why do it? So really kind of looking for that space where you can just have fun for the sake of it and put some creative effort into something that might work, might not, but at least you'll have fun doing it. And then obviously to Molly's earlier point, we really want to refine and review this stuff as we go. So this is our comms tree framework, which sometimes when you're thinking, oh, head of communication, should I have something a bit like more, technical than this? But actually we find that this really simple methodology works so well for us. And just to be really clear with what we do at Ben & Jerry's is we bring in people from across the business to this comms tree framework. So whether it's people from our content team, digital, comms, PR, social, or whether it might be, people from our NGO partners, really to work out what is it that's most important to say here. And taking the Tony's Chocolate Only partnership as an example, we could have launched these fantastic flavors as the hook. And the first message might have been, Ben & Jerry's and Tony's Chocolate Only launched these fantastic new flavors. And what's even sweeter is the flavors aim to change the chocolate industry, one bite at a time, one scoop at a time. So we had conversations internally about that, what's going to be the best way to communicate this change that we're trying to make in the world. But what we really felt was the values message needed to come first, because it's about that need state of belonging. People want to make sure that they're kind of choosing a company, choosing a product, choosing a brand that aligns with their values. So we really wanted to make sure we were landing that values commitment first, celebrated by products. So you'll see here that the communications tasks are leading with values, moving on to products that celebrate that, and then an education job where we go deeper into the inequalities of the chocolate industry and how Tony's Open Chain can try to address those. So we have our communications tasks, then we go on to our key messaging, and then we have our phases. So launch and excite, launch and awareness, and then some education pieces, and then suggested content that flows from that. So one's flowing from the other. So you might see here the content for our values was about a launch video that would really describe why we're coming together. In the more product space, obviously what you need is pack shots that make you drool at the mouth and really want to dig into these products. Really brilliant photography that opens up the bars and the ice cream for you to see. And then the education piece needs more long form content and storytelling. So starting here really makes the whole team in on one place, thinking about how the campaign will come to life and zeroing in on what the key messages are and the priorities. And then not to dwell too much on this slide, but really just to say that in communications, as we know, it's just as important to think about what we won't say as what we will say. And I think spending some time here is really important before you brief any copywriters or, do visual guidelines or work out, kind of go into briefing stage, because guardrails are helpful, actually. I think we don't want to, make our creatives tied up with no wiggle room. But I think having guardrails on what we won't say is really important so that we don't have to go back to this stage where we've wasted time on creative development.
Wonderful. So once these messages are aligned and we've identified the key communication priorities and tasks, we then work to figure out what our platform strategy will be to distribute those messages as effectively as possible. So, I think this is a challenging space today when we get to this point, given that there are so many different available options for us to distribute content, especially in the past few years, as we've seen, e-commerce partners start to offer a lot of content distribution as well. When we think about everything from Amazon A+ content to, what Walmart Media Group is doing in the US, at least, there are just so many different ways that content is being distributed. So lots of places to go when we get to this point of our planning. But again, taking that audience first approach and putting ourselves in the consumer's shoes, what are they doing when they're coming onto these platforms? And therefore, what are they going to be most likely receptive to from us? So, if we're taking a place on their Instagram newsfeed, we might want to be delivering something that aligns with that mindset that they have when they're there, versus if they are, watching video content on YouTube or looking to order a quick something on Uber Eats. So really looking at consumer mindset, how can we select platforms that are going to bring us to the people who will be most receptive for our messages? And then, of course, where is our target demographic as well? I think as new platforms come onto the scene, it's like, oh, we all have to be on TikTok. Well, maybe not every company or brand has to be on TikTok right now, right? Like there are times when, yes, everyone needs to make a big movement, but it might not need to be immediate. It needs to be when your target audience is going to be having adoption to that new platform as well. So, to boil it down to some extent, we always look at our foundational platforms to ensure that we have consistent presence and selection of content being distributed when it comes to any campaign on these sort of 4 key areas. So no matter what the campaign is or what brand we're working for or with, ensuring that our brand website is going to be reflective of the new messages that we're trying to communicate, and a way for people to find product is always something that we ensure is in place. Search and making sure that if there's a long form content need or an organic search opportunity, how do we ensure that is set up appropriately? Social media, having one priority platform to really focus in on and build a community with. I think everyone has that one platform that is probably more intuitive for your company or brand that you're working with. So how do we ensure that always remains sort of an evergreen presence, because those people are choosing to participate with you and engage with you, and we want to make sure that they are treated the best with all the new news as well. And then finally, of course, having an e-commerce option if you're selling a product, picking one that you're really going to focus in on and make it as good of an experience as possible, especially with any new news, is also a priority as well.
So we've determined our messaging, we're prioritizing which channel we think our messaging should live on. And now this comes to the sexy Excel sheet part of marketing. And we know that that's not everybody's favorite place and it might not seem as creative, but I think we can't overemphasize how important a good comms calendar is, both because your campaign doesn't live in isolation, it lives within the kind of ecosystem of your communications across the year, but also because the more planning that you do here, the more that you can leave yourself with team resource, creativity, and bandwidth to do the fun, creative stuff that might kind of surprise you, whether that's a flashpoint in the media that your campaign will work really well with, or a trend on TikTok if TikTok has been identified as something that's worth diving into. So really, we pull this together. At Ben & Jerry's, we have a cadence of ongoing content that talks about flavors and flavor fun, whether that's bringing an ice cream back from our flavor graveyard, introducing a new flavor, or doing recipes with non-dairy. I mean, we also have an ongoing cadence of values content or activism content, which talks about the issues that matter to us and not just when they're popular. So it talks about our belief in championing refugee rights, talks about the idea that it's really important to have an equitable society and not just when we're running a campaign. It's really important that we educate people on the issues that matter to us and not just ask something of our community, that we're offering something all year round as well. I think sometimes when we focus too much on campaign moments, we're asking something of our fans rather than offering them quality content throughout the year and then having these big moments that they kind of want to drive engagement with. And also, we also see that the more we educate people on issues, the more likely they are to engage with topics later on. So a good comms calendar is important, but it's also important to see that we ladder this up to each channel so that we're bringing in other people from the team and not forgetting anything. So this, again, shouldn't be done in isolation by one person, one comms lead. It should be a collaborative process. And then, as Molly has alluded to, often we live in an omni-channel world. So we want to determine the things that we want to say and create those assets with these channels in mind. So once you prioritize your communications, prioritize your channels, you then create assets with the channels in mind. So it might be that you have the one creative theme or look and idea, but they differ slightly depending on the platform that you've created it to, whether that's Insta, Facebook, online video, whatever it might be. So this example here is Ben & Jerry's launched Moophoria, which is a lighter ice cream. And obviously we wanted to kind of bring to life this kind of lightness of the calories that are on the tub there. And we did this through kind of our ingredients floating in space. But you'll see that for each of the platforms, we brought that creative to life in a slightly different way that was optimized for the platform. And I think this is where the kind of fun creativity comes in. You have your guardrails, but that doesn't mean that you don't have room for creativity. And then just wanted to touch here on coordinated announcements. I think this is something that we see a lot in our business, but also I know many colleagues from other brands and other charities feel the same. It's how do you announce something on earned media, experiential, social, in an aligned and integrated way? And at Ben & Jerry's, we announce our products before distribution. So when we have a new ice cream that we want to tell people about, we make sure that we're doing that before they can see it on the shelf. Because we want to be the ones to get people as excited about ice cream as we are. But I think it's really important to have that integrated moment to make sure that when you're announcing on social or through a press release or whatever it might be, you're also thinking through the other touch points that Molly has touched on before. So website, have you got a home screen takeover? How are you featuring it on your homepage? Are you capturing that in a flavor page? How are you bringing it to life? Your organic social posts, how many are you doing? Don't think that everybody sees that one organic post that you do at the beginning of the week, making sure that you're having further ones in your comms calendar, earned media and influencer engagement, email newsletter, making sure your care lines understand the information. Really think through how aligned you can be at that launch moment and then moving on to that sustained moment, keeping that alignment across channel. And then I just thought that actually we've given quite a lot of technical spreadsheets. So it'd be nice to show some assets. So we're going to show you now a chocolate love affair from Ben & Jerry's and Tony's we showed you earlier. We're going to show you the launch video. And then also I wanted to include on this slide that secondary message we had. So we said that the values was the most important thing because the partnership started with our values. But also we did have a job to do for those people that will maybe only ever connect with Ben & Jerry's over their love of cookie dough. So you do have a job to do in your campaigns of just informing people. So the still that you'll see on the slide there is informing people that we had new ice creams and new chocolate bars that were inspired by one another. One is new and the other one is coming soon. That asset doesn't tell the whole value story. And of course it shouldn't. Not every asset should do every job. And we'll just play the launch video here just for a bit of fun.
Okay, let's see if this works.
And what's important about that asset, obviously, is if people don't watch all the way to the end, we have our key message, which is the values at the front. And then when we say we tickled each other's taste buds and there were products as a result of it, that comes later on in the video. So it's about making those choices in the beginning when you're doing your comms tree, because that will feed through to your assets.
Oh boy. Okay. Another start there. So once we get through all these pieces, as you can see, a lot of this work is stacking on top of each other to get to a place where we then are ready to talk about investment. So, looking back at, again, the business goals that we have, the comms priorities that we're looking to support, and who we're looking to get in front of with those communications. We also take historical performance into our consideration set during the investment strategy phase to ensure that, looking back at what we know, where are we most likely going to be effective at accomplishing certain types of objectives? Where is our investment going to work hardest for us to reach a certain demographic or type of person, and have that inform where we choose to invest looking forward. So when we get to this phase, we then take our handy dandy comms calendar and we layer in our investment on top of that. So, we'll end up having additional tabs as, keeping the Excel fun alive, where we are focusing and showing budget based off of objective we're looking to achieve with that media, whether that be awareness or conversions or engagement, if consideration is something we're going after, what communications that investment will be supporting and where. And this gives us at least a place to start, but that doesn't mean that it will never change throughout the course of the year, depending upon the performance that we're seeing once we're in market and the response that we're seeing on different creatives and platforms once we go live. So, with that in mind, we then, once we kind of align on those original investment buckets and objectives, we create an optimization plan. So we look to have our key KPIs in place by platform. We have benchmarks that we'll measure off of that are based off of historical performance and industry performance when we have that available. And then what learning questions do we have in mind? What do we need to understand about new content formats or ad formats, different audiences that we might be looking to communicate with or reach, different platforms that we're trialing on, and how can we ensure that that's part of our executional plan so that we're never having something go live and treating it in a set it and forget it mindset, but we are constantly making adjustments based off of learnings in year versus just looking at annual plans and sort of copy and pasting from what we had done previously. So while this guides our optimization plans, we then will also pull together a measurement strategy as well. So there are so many different ways that we can measure success, and none of them are perfect, as I'm sure you guys deal with all the time. So, thinking again, what exactly are we looking to solve for? We can then either determine third-party partners, platform measurement solutions, internal models, whatever it might be for us to get at whether it's offline impact, in-store sales, brand lift, brand equity, people's association with a partner or value that we're looking to really drive home. We can align measurement solutions back with those objectives to ensure that we have a really clear read on how all of the work that we've just talked through and done has ultimately achieved or not achieved that end goal. So, kind of summarizing, I know we went through a ton of detail, and Kerry, please chime in as we talk through these. But I think, as we look at our campaign planning process, it is very detailed and very tactical. And I think to say a few key takeaways that hopefully are helpful when you're thinking about campaign planning moving forward, it's really important ultimately at the very beginning and to keep in mind throughout the process to know what impact looks like for you and how you'll know it when you see it. So being really just clear about that and aligned on that as a group, and as a team really makes the whole planning and executional process easier. I think, as Kerry said upfront, aligning on who you are as a brand and what your brand is looking to achieve long-term is also something to always kind of have everyone on the same page about and have in mind. And then just continuing to think audience first at every phase. This is something that I ask myself all the time when I'm going through a planning process or a campaign execution. If I were the one receiving this message, or if I were the one looking to make a purchase or sign up for a new service or give my information to someone, what would be best for me? What would I most prefer? What would be most engaging? What would be most exciting? What would I get the most value from? I think as much as an empathetic approach we can have to our end user, the better. So this is something that we try to always take into consideration. With that in mind, I think asking questions along the way, and there's no way to know the answer to everything, especially in the space that we work in. So, being comfortable, especially in a team setting or with agency partners, to just continue asking questions is so important. And then I think there's no such thing as over planning. I mean, you can have plans and have more plans and replan again. And, there always will be things that come up and need to change, but it's easier to be agile and react to real-time moments when you have a plan. I think that it's almost like contradictory to say that, but I'm sure it's always like, well, how can we go viral, or how can we address these things that are happening? And the way that we do that best is by having sort of contingency plans in place that allow us to act quickly. And then the last piece, leave 20% for the unknown. Whenever we look at our investment strategies, we kind of follow that 80-20, sometimes 70-30 rule, depending upon how crazy we're feeling. But, there are things that are tried and true and that we know and have great data points to support why we make the choices that we make when we execute. But having a little bit of fun and remembering that we work in marketing in a space that experimentation sometimes yields the best results. Having that in mind and planning for that, I think makes a huge difference. So, whether that's 20% of your energy, brain space, investment, whatever it might be, having an open mind for those opportunities when they arise will make all the difference. So, Kerry, any builds or other things to add?
No, I think that's right, obviously, because we're aligned. But also, I think that asking questions along the way, I think a collaborative way of working, and as much as you can, which is hard for everybody, all of us, is leaving egos at the door and not being afraid to say, actually, on this one, I'm not sure if I am the expert. Let me bring other people in, is where we're going to get to that space where you can kind of get things decided to leave that 20%, having as much space to succeed as possible.
Awesome.
Well, let me jump in here and just say, wow. That was incredible. Seriously. Thank you both very, 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 very much for taking the time there. I genuinely, like, I think there's probably two talks that I'd now recommend to people in wanting to start their marketing career. The first would be On the Contrary by Mark Ritson, because I think it lays out really wonderfully the idea of diagnosis, strategy, and tactics. And then this is going to be the second one. This is going to be, once you've got that diagnosis, strategy, and tactics in mind, and it's lodged in there, this gives you everything you need. So honestly, both Kerry, Molly, thank you both for, like there's this overused phrase, right? Lifting the lid or opening the box. And people say that they're going to do it. And then, they kind of maybe do it, and they kind of might show you some stuff, but then there's a bit blurred out. The fact that you've both been so generous with your knowledge there, so structured that people can follow it afterwards, then I really, really hope that you can see the chat feature right now, which is blowing up with people that are just like so blooming grateful. That is the talk that I wish that I had when I started marketing 10 years ago. So thank you both. Really, really, absolutely insane. Molly, if you want to stop sharing your screen for now, then we'll be able to see.
I enjoyed the pun, Joe, lifting the lid. We use that a lot of Ben & Jerry's. So
oh, God. Oh, no, that's horrible. Although we should try and find more puns. So there's 22 open questions right now. So folks, if you've got a question that you'd like to add, or probably more realistically that you would like to give some weight to, by all means, give a thumbs up to the questions that are presently in there, because we'll make sure to prioritize those. And with that in mind, then there's a battle between Simon and Claire at the top, but I'm going to take Claire's question because it was one that sort of came to my mind too while watching, which was, in terms of timeframes, how long do your campaigns take to develop and launch? Do you plan for a more longer term / year-long campaign messaging, or more seasonal / reactional campaigns? And do you use this process every time you plan a campaign, whether it's short or long term? And then puts in brackets, sorry, there's multiple questions there.
I maybe will answer on behalf of Ben & Jerry's and then pass over to Molly. But at Ben & Jerry's, it really does depend. So I think when we're talking about products, you might have a product that's launching globally and there's big media investment that means that you really need this whole deck to be followed through from beginning to end. But then we might have some innovations that are on a much quicker turnaround in terms of bringing that product to life. And it might be that the main channel is in our scoop shops and there's not any paid media investment behind it, but you want to really make sure that you're leaning in more heavily to PR and social, for example. So I think what we do at the beginning of the year is identify which of those big campaigns that need kind of what we would say an all singing, all dancing campaign process, which are the smaller moments that might need more of a kind of sprint team of people that would get together and do kind of like a lesser version of this. And then what we might sometimes do also in activism is you can't predict the plans that might be put in place. You can't predict the moments that might cause a flashpoint where all of the work that we've been doing on refugee rights suddenly needs to be pulled together into a campaign. So really, as an unhelpful answer, there isn't a one size fits all. I think in an ideal world, a 6-month lead in time would be fantastic. Any more, when you go into that year stage, sometimes you lose some of that creativity. So I think if Ben & Jerry's a 6-month lead in would probably be optimal if you had a chance to get it.
That's perfect. Do you have anything to add, Molly?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree. And I think, for some of the smaller brands that we work with, we can do shorter lead times. We'll see 3 months and look at sort of quarterly planning as a way to kind of stay on top of quick growth or trends that we might be able to find relevance within. But I think having an annual plan that at least gives structure to the year and what you expect to happen is always helpful. And then from there, if you can do these like more in-depth planning cycles on a more regular basis, that's the approach that we try to take with some of the other brands that we work with.
That's perfect. Thank you. And the question that came off the back of that was that, is this purely for the marketing team? So it struck me that a lot of this stuff could be used to get buy-in from, the rest of an organization, right? But then the second question that comes off the back of that is, how much do you show the rest of the organization? Because presumably if you went through a 6-stage process with Excel spreadsheets, they don't necessarily need to see that. So How do you, is it
Yeah, and
for,
sometimes when you let people peek behind the curtain, it kind of sometimes people lose confidence in the project that you then want to deliver as kind of a finished product. So I think it is a conversation that you should have in terms of which stakeholders do you bring in at the beginning of that planning process that would benefit from it? And then when do you get stakeholders, whether it be the country leads in each market that need to then speak to trade about it? When do you bring people in? And I think it isn't one answer each time, but it is the benefit of peeking behind the curtain versus having to get full confidence in people as well. So what's that balance?
I love that. And it's always, if there's one word to live life by, it's balance, right? So
yeah, I'm not perfect at it.
Sure. That's great. So we'll go to the next question from Simon. So we saw a lot of Excel spreadsheets there today, which was phenomenal. And as a highly unorganized marketer, also sort of made me think that I need to step up my game. But Simon asks about what systems you use to project manage your campaign management. So is it all Excel based, or do you use, say, the Trellos or the Asanas of the world to sort of coordinate with the rest of your team?
So we use Trello quite a bit, and we have clients that use Airtable, and our team works a lot on Airtable through some of our clients as well. Sometimes Asana or other sort of more ticketing based systems, I guess we can call them. But definitely, I think there's still a use case for just a good old Excel spreadsheet from time to time too. So, we trial out different project management tools regularly, and I just think it kind of depends on what your team needs to some extent to be able to. There's so many good options and not good options, but I think it all depends on kind of what the problem is that we might be able to solve for. But I would say yes to Trello. I have a few people on my team who are like obsessed with it, and I always try to get obsessed with it, but project management. But Kerry, any specifics from the Ben & Jerry's side?
Yeah, I would say we use a ticket-based system when it comes to briefing copywriters or designers, because we're such a collaborative team here that we definitely fell into, and I think myself actually the most, fell into the trap of going over to someone's desk, asking him to solve a project for you, and then realizing that you've taken your problem, put it on someone's desk, not put it in any kind of form or any kind of prioritization, and what you've really done is cause your colleague more stress. So we use a ticketing system, and we're very strict about it here, so that our design team, whether they're based in the US or in the UK, can prioritize the asks that we're giving them. So ticketing is a huge thing here. And then also Excel and project management is the main thing, Trello and Excel.
That's perfect. Thank you. I appreciate the answer to a lot of these things is always going to be, it depends, but it's always good to sort of have a vote in specific directions. Airtable, for example, was a new piece of software to me only a couple of weeks ago. So I think that really gives people the opportunity to investigate these things. So it's always a good question to ask, even if the answer is it depends. The next question comes from Tina. So Tina is asking from a slightly different perspective than what I suspect. I think we've seen the whole shebang today, really, which is something like super appreciative for. But Tina asks, I'm a one-woman marketing / brand / sales + content band for an SME. Any advice on keeping it together?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be head of communications at a charity. And so I just want to say I feel your pain. It's definitely, I'm not going to pretend it's not easier working with a big team. It is. But I think the takeaway from today is probably to go through the steps in order and to ask yourself as many questions along the way. I think all too often you waste time at the end by having to go back to the beginning, especially when it comes to maybe messaging, when it comes to the things that you should say and the things that you absolutely shouldn't say and leave out. And maybe also finding that business partner, whether it's a mentor or a colleague, to once you get your thoughts in order, bounce ideas off. I think that's always really, really helpful, but try and go through it methodically and really grill your own answers as much as possible, because sometimes the answers that you go to bed at night are not the ones that you wake up in the morning with. So give yourself that rigor of just constantly questioning yourself and testing.
That's awesome. Molly, anything extra to add there at all?
I think it's impossible to do it all. So when you're on a small team or a one-woman show or one-man show, giving yourself the grace to know that you're not going to be able to be everywhere and do everything. And what do you think the biggest bets are that you can do really well and that will drive the biggest impact, and, build on from there. I think so much of this work gets greater over time, especially when you're with a smaller business or a growing business. So I think, hedging your bets a little bit and kind of focusing in on what's going to be most impactful is always a helpful thing to remember.
That's really lovely. Thank you. Because I think that may also combine in with Kelsey's question that sits in the Q&A right now, which is the scalability of these models and whether there's any steps you should skip if you're working with smaller companies and brands. And so I wanted to take a stab here because, of course, the answer is going to be, it depends. But I love that word that you used there, Molly, which was about impact. Mm-hmm. And so acknowledging, Kerry, that you have to go through the steps one by one to sort of get to the place that you want to, it is another question to be asking all the time. What's going to have the most impact in terms of actually sort of doubling down on it and sort of prioritizing those things?
Yeah, and I think also giving yourself to Molly's point earlier, the part that this is your big bet, this is going to drive the impact, and then giving yourself permission to try something, that it's okay if that particular trial fails. So if you're going to do something new, align that a certain amount of your time, a certain amount of your investment, but actually make peace with the fact that that part might not be successful, but it's okay because you put the majority of your time towards what you think really will be. We have a flavour graveyard here at Ben & Jerry's where our dearly departed flavours go to die. And it's a really genuinely good thing in the office to remind you of the fact that even the best ideas sometimes don't always make it. So giving yourself that prioritization on impact, where it's going to work, but also permission to fail, that kind of one thing you want to try to learn about. And to Molly's earlier slide, that learning objective, where really are you learning the most is key.
Yeah. That's really cool. That was really smart as well. Like, not that you need my validation, but I really enjoyed and that point about sort of having an idea of what you're going to learn at the end as well. That was really, really cool. And I know it was appreciated in the chat as well. So thank you for sharing that, because I've never seen that before. That was really cool. We get a question here from Jess, and this goes back down to the Excel spreadsheets.
Good to see you, Molly.
Yeah. And so Jess asks, what's the best place to start with a communication calendar, and any recommendations of good templates? Maybe if we take the first half, though, that might be an easier, broader question to answer.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of them out there in the Google ecosystem. So I always joke that like Google should be everyone's best friend, right? But I think, it depends on, I won't say it depends. I think the best place to start, in my opinion, is, the comms calendar should act as a map of how to tie your communication objectives to your platforms and over time. So I think having the platforms and the comms and the timing in place is the baseline, and then you can layer on from there. And whether that be investment or assets or specific flighting, it can get into more depth from that point. But I think from the way that we've seen it work best, those sort of three things as fundamentals is the easiest place to start. And then as time progresses, you can add in more into it as you see fit.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That just makes perfect sense. Spot on answer. Let's go for the next one from Alex Knight, because I think we've hopefully answered the one from Emma. And I appreciate we're sort of ping-ponging a lot of the places here, but there's so many good questions. So I hope you don't mind.
No.
So this one comes from Alex, and Alex asks, how do you balance the brand crossover? So I think this is in reference to the Ben & Jerry's and the Tony's collaboration. The video ad used a lot of Tony's influence from the font, etc., while other assets were a bit more balanced, and particularly with the products and stuff like that. So I think this is a very specific question on the campaign, but how do you manage those sort of collaborations?
Well, when it came to our key visual, we made sure that was kind of even. So we had a kind of even mix of Ben & Jerry's visual identity and Tony Chocolonely visual identity. When it came to POS in store, if it was ice cream POS, it would lean more into the Ben & Jerry's visual identity. and then chocolate point of sale would lead more into Tony's Chocolate Only. And then on some cases, we had the same asset, but two versions of it, one that was kind of leaning in towards the ecosystem of Tony's visual identity, and some that were kind of leaning more into Ben & Jerry's. So when it comes to execution, I think it is a conversation of, does this feel like an equal balance? Will it work within our platforms? Will our fans see that as something that fits in our ecosystem, or will they not engage because it doesn't look like something that we should be putting out? But actually, I think it starts before then. It starts with your picking of a partner. So Tony's Chocolate Only's tone of voice is very playful. They do a lot just for fun. They're quite silly. And they talk about serious issues 1 minute on their Instagram, and another minute they're talking about just the joy of chocolate. So I think actually we had quite a few synergies when it came to our copy, our tone of voice, and kind of our bold and colourful brand identity. So I think if you pick a partner that you have some strong alignments with, that won't be as hard. And then when it comes to the execution, you can think, is one asset enough, or do we need two versions of it, one for each channel? Outdoor advertising, do we need it to be leaning more to one than the other? Yeah. But it's definitely, annoyingly, when it comes to marketing, it's a conversation, isn't it? Another conversation to be had.
It's like any good relationship, though, isn't it? It's about, I guess it's about communication and values, and
yes.
The word you didn't use there, but I definitely heard coming through your answer was
definitely and being open with one another. I think it's, if you've seen, we knew exactly which edits were taking place across each of our companies. So it wasn't like we suddenly saw kind of a surprise campaign video on a partner's platform. And that dating phase we have with one another meant that we built that trust and that honesty with one another, which is key.
100%. No, I love it. No, that's spot on. And hopefully more places can be like that, because it seems like the right approach to these things as well, that sort of openness and trust. So thank you. We've probably only got one time for one last question, and we'll take it from Willem, and it's more about choosing values. So it might slightly sit outside the scope of today's session just a little bit, but Willem asks, is there a risk you're too explicit about one's values, so you might put some people off, for Ben & Jerry's particularly, etc.?
That's okay though. I think that with progression comes pushback, and if you know what your values are, then it's completely okay that some people are turned off. I think then you are clear with where you stand, and as many people leave you, join you. And I think the alternative is being vanilla with what your values are, which isn't a position to take. So I think, yes, people will be turned off, and that is okay, providing you are starting from a place that's genuine, that comes from impact. We have activism managers at Ben & Jerry's whose whole job is to get to know NGOs and movement builders. They don't have anything to do with kind of selling ice cream, and they work really, really hard to build these partnerships. So it should come from a really informed place. We ask NGOs how we can be of service to them, not how they can boost our brand equity score. So as long as it comes from a place where it's true, and you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're being thoughtful about it, hopefully you will bring people into a movement. And if people leave you and boycott your business, so be it, providing you're changing the world for the better, or trying your best to.
Spot on. No, I love it. We only saw the example of Patagonia last week, sort of standing by their values, their founding principles. That was incredible. It was really, really, really cool. So bang on. Purpose defines activity, not the other way around. So that's really cool. Also, I don't know whether you snuck in another pun there, because you said as long as it's not vanilla. So
gosh, see, it's 7 years.
I'm so sorry. It's this thing when you become a dad, then you can't help but notice the bad jokes. Anyway, right, with all that said, we've had our hour, and it's time for your holiday as well, Kerry. So honestly, thank you both so much for your honesty, transparency, for just being so open. I know that everyone's appreciated it so much. You can probably see the chat feature right now.
Yeah, the chat was amazing. Thank you, everyone.
It is bonkers. So thank you all. And we're back again next Tuesday, 2:00 once again, speaking about the lessons that Fergus O'Connell has learned from the best in the biz about building great strategies. So hopefully you can all be there. Thank you for taking the time. Please do say thank you to our sponsors. If you're in London tonight and there's still some tickets available, by all means sign up for tonight's London event. All that said, we'll see you all very soon. Thank you both. It's really, really appreciated.
Bye, Molly.
Thank you.